Good evening and welcome to tonight's Undaunted, bringing to the news on church stories. I am Oyi Opala. Let's begin. The cries of a people in anguish echoes once again from the heart of Ambazonia, as yet another life has been violently cut short under the weight of colonial brutality. The tragic death of Amando, a young student senator at the University of Bamenda, who was savagely beaten to death by a colonial police officer, has sent shock through the nation. But this was more than a killing. It was a public execution of hope, of youth, of the dream that one day Ambazonians might live free from fear and oppression. In the wake of this horror, the colonial military stormed the town of Bafia like a swan of rage, abducting hundreds of innocent civilians, young and old, tearing them away from their families, dragging them to military barracks, where screams replaced silence. Eyewitnesses recount scenes of torture so brutal they defy humanity, bones broken, dignity stripped, and voices silenced, not just to punish, but to terrorize an entire people into submission. Question is, what crime did Amando commit? What sin did the people of Bafia bear? Their only offense being Ambazonian in a land where their identity has been criminalized. This is the unbearable reality of Ambazonia today. A place where the youth are not nurtured but hunted, where homes are not sanctuaries but targets, where justice is not blind but weaponized. Each present day brings fresh scars on bodies, on minds, and on a nation struggling to breathe beneath the boots of tyranny. Yet, even in our mourning, there is fire. Even in Ambazonians' grief, there is a call to remember, to resist, and to reclaim the future stolen from Ambazonia. All these and more will project on tonight's Undaunted, but first, let's get the prime headlines. Tonight on Undaunted, we'll start with the story tragedy in Bamenda, where a student, Amando, of the University of Bamenda dies after brutal colonial police beating. Also tonight, La Republic to Cameroon military crackdown in Bafia gives us a report where one colonial soldier has been found dead and hundreds of civilians abducted and tortured. Tonight, we'll take a look at the CPDM Dion Ngute's betrayal of an Ambazonian refugee. Also tonight, an imprisoned Ambazonian known as Pastor Bertin Kisob is challenging Biya in La Republic to Cameroon's presidential bid. On the African scene, former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari dies at 82, while on the foreign scene, Trump's administration doubles down on immigration in the midst of high-profile enforcement actions. Now let's get the news in full briefings. A devastating incident has shaken the University of Bamenda community as a student known as Amando lost his life after being brutally beaten by a colonial police officer. The events leading to this tragedy are both shocking and heartbreaking. According to reports, Amando had gone out with friends late at night and due to safety concerns in the town, decided to seek refuge at his girlfriend's residence. After calling her for permission to spend the night, he arrived at her place only to find himself locked out when she stopped answering her phone. In desperation, Armando knocked on the door at about 3 a.m., and it was a Colonial police officer who answered. Unleashing a violent assault on the young student, the girlfriend later filmed Armando in immense pain and shared the video in their student WhatsApp group, sparking the outrage and concern amongst other students. Despite efforts to rush him to Bambali Hospital, Armando's injuries proved fatal and he succumbed to the brutality he endured. This incident sparked widespread condemnation, with students and citizens demanding justice for Armando. The University of Bamenda and local authorities are urged to take immediate action to investigate this incident, hold those responsible accountable, and ensure that such tragedies do not reoccur. The community in general mourns the loss of a promising young leader, and the memory of Armando will serve as a rallying cry for justice and reform. This incident shows the atrocious actions of La Republic de Cameroon forces on innocent ones in Ambazonia, and this has to stop. In another sad story, in Bafia, a La Republic de Cameroon military operation has been linked to the ongoing war in southern Cameroon. This has resulted in a significant escalation of violence and human rights abuses. On Sunday, July 13th, an encounter between La Republic de Cameroon soldier and Ambazonian State Army at Mile 12 Bafia left one colonial soldier dead and several others injured. In the aftermath of the incident, the colonial military launched a massive crackdown on civilians in Bafia, abducting hundreds of people and transporting them to their barracks. Eyewitnesses report that several civilians were subjected to torture while in colonial military custody, highlighting a disturbing pattern of human rights abuses. The colonial military's actions have sparked widespread fear and anger among the local population, with many residents fleeing their homes in anticipation of further violence. The use of arbitrary arrest, torture, and other forms of cruel treatment is a clear violation of international human rights law and the Cameroonian institution. The La Republic de Cameroon government must be held accountable for the action of this military and take immediate steps to address these human rights abuses. We also call on the world to also take note of these developments and call for an end to the violence and repression in southern Cameroon. Moving on, a letter from an Ambazonian refugee in Ghana has brought renewed scrutiny to the actions of La Republic de Cameroon's Prime Minister Dion Ngute. The letter sent to the Independentist editorial desk alleges that Ngute previously referred to Ambazonians as terrorists during an international legal proceedings, an accusation the author frames as a calculated act of betrayal. An open letter penned by Abdul Adamu, an Ambazonian refugee currently residing in Ghana, has ignited a discussion regarding the role and allegiance of La Republic de Cameroon's Prime Minister Dion Ngute. The letter, published by Independentist News, directly challenges Ngute's public personnel, asserting he is not a bridge between peoples, but rather a career loyalist of the Yaoundé regime. Adamu's central accusation stems from Ngute's alleged conduct during a landmark case filed by Southern Cameroon at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in Banjul. According to Adamu, Ngute, while representing La Republic de Cameroon, described his own people as terrorists. The letter emphasizes that the statement was made before an international tribunal and served to criminalize, delegitimize, and humanize the population from which Ngute originates. The author of the letter dismisses that as a mere legal oversight, labeling it as a calculated act of betrayal made under oath to defend the government actively involved in significant human rights violations, including village burnings, mass arrest, and denying self-determination. Adamu contends that Ngute chose to weaponize the language of counter-terrorism, thereby aligning himself with the state's narrative that has, in the refugee view, justified violence against civilians in Ambazonia. The letter points out that to date, no apology or retraction for these alleged statements has been issued. Adamu Forger suggests an irony in Ngute's position given that other nations are acknowledging indigenous and minority rights. The refugee alleges that Ngute, despite his Ambazonian roots, is assisting in presenting a false image and criminalizing his own people on a global stage. The letter describes Ngute as Ambazonian by birth, Berti by political marriage, and French by administrative loyalty, painting the picture of a leader whose loyalties are not with his heritage. The writer urges Ambazonians not to be dismissed and misled by Ngute's public image, including what he calls his occasional visits to Biya or Bamenda and hollow speeches about dialogue, dismissing these as mere optics in the grand scheme of pacification. Abdul Adamu concludes by stating that Ngute's demeanor, such as recent bow to President Biya, signifies submission, not leadership, and a man who has traded truth for titles, justice for a seat at the oppressor's table. His letter aims for history to record Ngute not merely as silent during the crisis, but as a complicit. All right, still to come tonight, we'll head straight to the office of the Secretary of State for Communications and IT. Well, the Ambazonian Secretary of State for Communications and IT has strongly condemned participation in the upcoming elections in La République du Cameroon, urging Ambazonians to reject the process entirely. In a statement titled, "Beware Ambazonians, you are the prize," he argued that the election is not democratic but a strategy to substitute and erase the Ambazonian identity, something that began with the 1984 constitutional changes that removed Ambazonians from official recognition. Well, Dr. Mungwa warned that Ambazonians are not participants in this system but the actual prize sought by La République du Cameroon, and that voting in the elections would only legitimize their continued subjugation. The Secretary for State called for the unity and resistance, emphasizing the ongoing struggle for self-determination and the need to disengage from foreign political structures that deny Ambazonian sovereignty. Now let's get that audio from Dr. Mungwa.
Ambazonians at home and abroad. This is the voice of Ambazonia broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. Tonight's special program is titled Democracy by Substitution, the Mask and the Face. And what does this mean? It is a system where elections are not transitions but transactions, where ballots do not choose leaders but recycle legacies, where one ruler steps aside and another already selected steps in. This is the political game being played across Francophone Africa, and Cameroon is next in line. But beware, Ambazonia is the prize. They seek to control through illusion. Across French-controlled Africa, we've seen a disturbing trend. In Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, a true revolutionary, was assassinated, replaced by his French-aligned friend Blaise Compaoré. In Chad, Idriss Déby died on the battlefield, and his son, Mahamad Déby, was installed within hours in violation of the constitution. In Gabon, Ali Bongo, son of Omar Bongo, served France for years until a palace coup substituted him with a new pro-French military leader. And now in political transition in Yaoundé. No matter who wears the mask, Paul of Ambazonians at home and abroad. This is the voice of Ambazonia, broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. Tonight's special program is titled Democracy by Substitution, the Mask and the Face. And what does this mean? It is a system where elections are not transitions but transactions, where ballots do not choose leaders but recycle legacies, where one ruler steps aside and another already selected steps in. This is the political game being played across Francophone Africa, and Cameroon is next in line. But beware, Ambazonia is the prize. They seek to control through illusion. Across French-controlled Africa, we've seen a disturbing trend. In Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, a true revolutionary, was assassinated, replaced by his French-aligned friend Blaise Compaoré. In Chad, Idriss Déby died on the battlefield, and his son, Mahamat Déby, was installed within hours in violation of the constitution. In Gabon, Ali Bongo, son of Omar Bongo, served France for years until a palace coup substituted him with a new pro-French military leader. And now in Cameroon, Paul Biya, aged 92, is still on the ballot. But what does this mean? Don't be fooled. The plan is simple. Keep Biya on the ticket. Win the election through manipulation. Then, like in 1982 with Ahijo, force Biya to resign and substitute his son Frank Biya as the new face of the old regime. This is not democracy. It is democracy by substitution. The mask is Paul Biya, the face is Frank Biya, the hand behind both is France. So what does this mean for us Ambazonians? It means that the 2025 presidential elections in La République du Cameroon are not just about Cameroon. They are about legitimizing colonial rule in Ambazonia through a changing disguise. We've seen this before. In 1961, they said we were joining a federation. In 1972, they changed it to a unitary state. And in 1984, they erased our name entirely. And now in 2025, they want to install a dynasty to secure French economic and military interests in Biya, Victoria, and Bamenda. Fellow Ambazonians, let us not be deceived by the illusion of political transition in Yaoundé. No matter who wears the mask, Paul or Frank, Ambazonia remains under occupation. We are not voting in their elections. We are not participating in their fraud, and we are not lending legitimacy to their colonial designs. Our destiny is not decided in Etude, but in Ekok, Manthe, Dion, Bamenda, Ndop, and the great hills of the BLM. Let this message be clear. Ambazonia is not part of the theater, and democracy by substitution is not liberation, it is manipulation. This program is brought to you by the Department of Communications and IT of the Government of the Federal Republic of Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia. We urge all Ambazonians, reject any calls to vote in the 2025 presidential elections. Educate your communities, mobilize civil resistance, and support the October lockdown to deny legitimacy to this French-designed coup. This has been a public broadcast from the Voice of Ambazonia. Tonight's program, Democracy by Substitution, the Mask and the Face. Stay alert, stay informed, and stay free. Good night.
Well, that was not just all. In another recent broadcast, Dr. Mungur, speaking on behalf of the President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, Dr. Samuel Ikome Sako, also called for the unity In another recent broadcast, Dr. Mungur, speaking on behalf of Ambazonian leader Dr. Samuel Ikome Sako, raised concerns about France's increase in involvement in Bamenda area, describing the move as slow but deliberate. Dr. Sako emphasized the need for peace through liberation, asserting that no external party can shape Ambazonian's future without first acknowledging its past. He urged Ambazonians to speak with one voice, stressing unity at a time he described as a crossroads for the movement. Echoing the Pan-African sentiment, Dr. Sako declared if one African raises, others will follow, calling on the continent to recognize and support the Ambazonian struggle. Now let's get that audio from Dr. Mungwa.
Ambazonians at home and abroad. This is the voice of Ambazonia, broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. Tonight's special program is titled Democracy by Substitution, the Mask and the Face. And what does this mean? It is a system where elections are not transitions but transactions, where ballots do not choose leaders but recycle legacies, where one ruler steps aside and another already selected steps in. This is the political game being played across Francophone Africa, and Cameroon is next in line. But beware, Ambazonia is the prize. They seek to control through illusion. Across French-controlled Africa, we've seen a disturbing trend. In Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, a true revolutionary, was assassinated, replaced by his French-aligned friend Blaise Compaoré. In Chad, Idriss Déby died on the battlefield, and his son Mahamad Déby was installed within hours in violation of the constitution. In Gabon, Ali Bongo, son of Omar Bongo, served France for years until a palace coup substituted him with a new pro-French military leader. And now in Cameroon, Paul Biya, aged 92, is still on the ballot. But what does this mean? Don't be fooled. The plan is simple. Keep Biya on the ticket. Win the election through manipulation. Then, like in 1982 with Ahijo, force Biya to resign and substitute his son Frank Biya as the new face of the old regime. This is not democracy. It is democracy by substitution. The mask is Paul Biya, the face is Frank Biya, the hand behind both is France. So what does this mean for us Ambazonians? It means that the 2025 presidential elections in La République du Cameroon are not just about Cameroon. They are about legitimizing colonial rule in Ambazonia through a changing disguise. We've seen this before. In 1961, they said we were joining a federation. In 1972, they changed it to a unitary state. And in 1984, they erased our name entirely. And now in 2025, they want to install a dynasty to secure French.
Sincerest apologies for that little mix up there before the end of news from the home front. We'll definitely bring you the second part of that Dr. Mungwa's audio. Meanwhile, in another report, Reverend Pastor Bertin Kisob, who is a leader of the Cameroon's Party for Social Justice, illegally imprisoned since 2017, has decided to submit his candidacy for neighboring La Republic to Cameroon's October 12, 2025 presidential election. From his rather unique vantage point at Kondengin Central Prison, Kisob Asat is the very first to file with the Colonial electoral body Elicam. He has also offered a rather expensive political plan, which includes engaging with Ambazonian leaders, ditching the CFA France, and transforming both nations into the United States of Africa. Well, complete with a new currency and a guaranteed monthly income for everyone. But that's what he says. Kisob, who has been residing at the Colonial State's expense since 2017, ostensibly is in connection with the ongoing war in Ambazonia, has formally entered the race for the Colonial presidency despite his continued stay at Yaoundé's Kondengin Central Prison. Kisob's head of the Cameroon's Party for Social Justice confidently claims to be the inaugural candidate to submit his applications to Elicam for the elections scheduled for the 12th of October 2025. This marks his second attempt following a 2018 bid that, for reasons of administrative efficiency, was not accepted. The detainee, who currently considers himself a political prisoner, outlines a rather comprehensive political agenda. From his confinement, his platform includes concepts as initiating direct negotiations with Ambazonian leaders, both those currently detained and those in exile, and a move of withdrawing both countries from the CFA France currency zone. He also advocates for a new ideology he terms Kemersisme. According to a statement from the CPSJ, Kisob's vision extends to proposals of renaming the entire country United States of Africa, while introducing a new national currency called the Kimat and ensuring a basic monthly income for all citizens, presumably regardless of economic realities. The CPSJ claims that discussions are underway with three Ambazonian leaders of the diaspora to facilitate a peaceful electoral process in southern Cameroon. The party had earlier declared that Kisob would begin an unlimited hunger strike if he were not released by January 1st, 2024. The CPSJ confirmed that this strike commenced in early 2024, but unsurprisingly, it did not result in his liberation. Bertin Kisob remains in detention as we speak, so his dreams may just be there, but we'll see how it goes. All right, before we head into news across Africa, let's get that Dr. Mungwa's audio.
Sovereign silhouette, the emblem of Ambazonia. From the azure embrace of the Atlantic reflecting from the Ambas Bay, the iconic Fako Mountain ascends with a silent, stoic grace, carving a silhouette against the sky. This towering sentinel is more than a geographical marvel. It is the heart of southern Cameroons, the stoic guardian of Ambazonia, a symbol steadfast as the unyielding spirit manifests in the unity of the land's 13 counties. Encircling this earthen spire, a dove of peace edges its arc, untouched and serene. As it soars with wings unfurled, it casts shadows upon the land.
This is the voice of Ambazonian, broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. Fellow Ambazonians, a recent statement from France has shaken consciences across Africa, and it should shake ours as well. Speaking with startling honesty, former French Minister of the Economy, Thierry Breton, declared, and I quote, "It is Emmanuel Macron's stupidity that opened the eyes of Africans. One thing is certain, if France loses its colonies, our children and grandchildren will go to Africa in search of livelihoods. Immigration will reverse direction. Africa has no history and therefore cannot lead the world." This is not just rhetoric. It was a rare moment of unfiltered colonial truth, a glimpse into the mindset that still drives France's policies toward Africa. And here in Ambazonia, those words strike a chilling chord. Because, as we speak, France is not watching from afar. It is moving, quietly but deliberately, into Bamenda. Is this diplomacy or disguise? Over the past year, the French ambassador to Cameroon has made Bamenda one of his most frequent destinations. He comes with words of peace. He smiles. He visits the Alliance Française. He holds closed-door talks with carefully selected individuals. He speaks of unity, dialogue, and cooperation. But on the ground, the story is different. As the ambassador visits, military reinforcements follow. Checkpoints multiply. Fear deepens in our neighborhoods. France speaks of reconciliation but reinforces repression. That contradiction must not be ignored, and now it has been addressed. This is the government response from President Dr. Samuel Ikomo-Sako. As President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, let me be unequivocal. Ambazonia has a history. It is a history of law, liberty, resistance, and betrayal. It is a history recorded in the United Nations archives and written in the blood of our people. Thierry Breton's remarks are not a misstatement. They are a strategic narrative to justify interference, to deny our identity. The French ambassador cannot claim peace while backing a genocidal regime. You cannot sponsor terror and call it diplomacy. You cannot occupy our land and ask us to smile. Let it be known, Ambazonia seeks freedom with dignity, not dependence dressed as friendship. We will never allow the erasure of our history by those who profit from our pain. What's the role of Alliance Française? The Alliance Française claims to promote culture and language. But in contested zones like Ambazonia, it acts as a soft power outpost of the French state. Let us go back to Breton's words. Africa has no history. That's not ignorance, it's strategy. To interfere in our destiny, they must first deny our past. So we ask, whose culture is being celebrated in those halls? Whose version of our story is being taught? And whose interests does that serve? The real fear is a rising Africa. Bretons didn't mention all Ambazonia. He mentioned Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, countries shaken off French influence. He warned that if one African leader falls, others will fall too. But what if the opposite is true? What if one African nation rises and inspires the rest? What if Ambazonia is that spark? A sovereign Ambazonia is not a military threat to France. It is a moral threat, a living example that liberation is possible. So what must be done now? This is no ordinary diplomatic episode. The pattern is too clear. The stakes are too high. Here is what President Sako and the government of Amazonia now call upon us to do. Speak with one voice. Let Breton's statement meet Ambazonians' unwavering reply. Monitor foreign institutions. Scrutinize the role of Alliance Française, not by their slogans, but by their impact. Expose occupation. Use civil journalism to show the truth. Reclaim our story. Support the national campaign. Ambazonia has a history. We are at the crossroads. Breton warned that if one African leader falls, the rest will abandon the dream. But we say, if one African nation rises, others will follow. And as President Sako declared, let Ambazonia be the torch. Let our story be not one of submission, but of rebirth. Ambazonia is not against the world. We are simply standing for ourselves, with truth, with dignity, with justice. Let the world hear us. The French ambassador may walk the streets of Bamenda, offering smiles and slogans, but history will record who stood, who bowed, and who rose. We are not waiting for permission. We are declaring a future. A free Ambazonia, a sovereign nation of memory, principle, and promise. That has been the voice of Amazonia.
Well, Ambazonians are definitely not waiting for any permission. And with that, we end the news from the home front. Right after the break, we'll get into Africa to see what's happening. Well, former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has died at the age of 82 while receiving medical treatment in London. Officials confirmed this on Sunday. Buhari, a former military leader who returned decades later as a democratically elected president, was a dominant figure in the Nigerian politics for over 4 decades. He first came to power in 1983 through a military coup, ruling with an iron grip until he was overthrown in 1985. After years out of the spotlight, he made a political comeback and in 2015 became Nigeria's first opposition candidate to win a presidential election. His election marked a turning point in the country's democracy, where he campaigned on promises to end endemic corruption and defeat the Boko Haram insurgency plaguing the northeast area of Nigeria. He served 2 terms, leading Africa's most populous nation until 2023. While his administration scored some anti-corruption and military gains, it also faced criticisms over worsening insecurity, economic struggles, and allegations of human rights abuses. Buhari is survived by his wife, Aisha, and several children. Funeral arrangements are expected to follow today, following his Islamic traditions. Also in Gabon, electoral roll revision has begun. The timetable for the upcoming national vote on the 27th of September has officially been announced, with members of the National Election Commission sworn in by the Constitutional Court. As part of the electoral preparation, the revision of voter rolls commenced on the 14th of July and will run through 12th of August. This nationwide exercise aims to add new voter, remove deceased or ineligible individuals, update personal information, and register changes in voting centers. The move is a critical step towards ensuring a transparent and credible electoral process. But right after the break, we'll head up to see what Trump is doing in this second administration, especially as it relates to immigration. President Donald Trump and his administration are leaning heavily on immigration policy as a central pillar of his second-term agenda, a strategy that proved pivotal in securing his 2024 re-election. In recent weeks, the administration and its allies have spotlighted a series of high-profile immigration enforcement actions, using them to reinforce their tough on-border message. Such incidents occurred Thursday during a federal raid on a legal marijuana farm in Ventura County, California, where immigration agents were met with resistance from protesters. The standoff has since become a flashpoint in the administration's renewed crackdown on undocumented labor and visa violations in the cannabis industry. White House officials and Republican strategists have seized on these confrontations as emblematic of what they describe as a law and order approach to immigration, hoping to galvanize the conservative base while putting political pressure on sanctuary states like California. We're enforcing the laws already on the books, a senior administration official said. These actions demonstrate the president's commitment to protecting Americans' jobs and communities. Critics, however, argue the administration is using isolated incidents to justify sweeping crackdowns that disproportionately affect immigrants' communities and undermine state-regulated industries. As the 2028 election cycle slowly takes shape, immigration is once again poised to be a defining and divisive issue in American politics. Not just that. As President Donald Trump intensifies his criticisms of the Kremlin, a sweeping bipartisan sanctions bill targeting Russia is gaining traction in the U.S. Senate. Introduced in April by Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, the legislation has drawn support from 50 senators across party lines. The proposed bill aims to pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin to enter peace negotiations with Ukraine. It threatens new sanctions if Moscow refuses to engage in talks or continues military actions that violate Ukraine's sovereignty. The growing bipartisan backing comes amid a noticeable shift in Republican rhetoric towards Russia, signaling political and potential movement on Capitol Hill to further tighten pressure on the Kremlin. Right, that's it for tonight on Undaunted. But before we go, let's take a look at the headlines that make the major stories. Right, tonight on Undaunted, we told you that a tragedy has occurred in Bamenda, where a student of the University of Bamenda died after brutal Colonial police beating. Also tonight, we took a walk in Bafia, where one Colonial soldier died and hundreds of civilians abducted and tortured. Tonight, we talked about the refugee who accuses Colonial PM Dion Ngute of betrayal. Ambazonian imprisoned pastor Bertin Kisob is challenging President Biya in La Republique de Cameroon's presidential bid. Also tonight, Dr. Martin Mungwer gave Ambazonians reasons not to be part of La Republique de Cameroon elections. Former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari dies at 82, was seen on the African scene, and on the foreign scene we told you that President Trump has doubled down on immigration in the midst of high-profile enforcement actions. Sincerest apologies for not being able to have Barrister Mbeseha in the house. Hopefully tomorrow he joins us on Undaunted. But on behalf of the technical team behind tonight's production, it's good night and God bless.